Welcome to those who are watching this live and to those who may watch it later. This is the School of Christian Mysticism Meditation Support Group. And the aim of this support group is to really help people on their meditation journey. So that is partly conceptual, but partly practical, looking at some of the problems and obstacles that may happen during that meditation journey. And the focus today is really on the fear that can happen and the despondency that can happen. It's not all sweetness and light. It can be quite difficult. It can be, as John of the Cross puts it, we can experience the dark night of the soul too. So that's our general topic, and we'll be talking around that. And I'd just like to start off by just reminding everybody of the general process of meditation, really, of what happens during meditation, that it's really a falling away of the various parts of the ego self. The outside world falls away, aided often by having the eyes closed. Then awareness of the body falls away. And then awareness even of the mind and our own thoughts falls away. And this leaves us in a, and this is something experienced by, I think, anybody who's been meditating for a long period of time, particularly, or some people more quickly than that, and some people take more time to reach it, but a state that might be regarded as emptiness or a void, that all the things that you normally think of as yourself are just not there anymore. And that can be, at first, quite scary, because you think, oh, what's happened here? If I go further into this, I won't exist anymore. I'll have no being. But the thing about the emptiness or the void is that we continue to know it. We know that we're in the void, or we know that we have been in that emptiness or that void. So that witnessing self within us is still there, or else we wouldn't know it. And when we think about that and realize that, then that fear goes away, because the witnessing self is the true self, the real self, that witnesses everything. It's always there, doesn't change, never goes away. It witnesses the outside world, the body, the mind, just as much as it witnesses what we call the void. So that true self, the unchanging real self, is still there. We're not lost. In fact, all we've lost is our ego self, which the old self must die before the new self becomes apparent. And we learn that from Paul, indeed, in the New Testament. And that new self, the true self, is our pathway to knowing something of God. That's when we start to feel something of God's grace, of God's peace, of God's mercy. And we start to think, oh, I'm getting somewhere now. And then what often happens is that all disappears again. It just goes. We no longer have that sense of God's grace within us. And that's a kind of darkness. And that's how I would see the dark night of the soul. We thought we were getting somewhere. Then we realize that that's gone. God, where have you gone? God doesn't go anywhere, but we're being taught that we cannot do anything at all. We are completely powerless. We cannot get anywhere. Only God can do that for us, and only through the grace of God can we continue on this spiritual path. It's a humbling experience that teaches us that we are not the agents here. God is the agent. And that's how I see the dark night of the soul. And the thing about it is that it comes to an end. You continue in faith because faith tells us that this will pass, that God is always there. We know that God is there. We have the faith that God is always there. God cannot go anywhere. So we maintained in faith. So not anxious or despondent, but continue in faith. That's my thoughts.
Malcolm, it's just such a beautiful account and so beautifully expressed. And I wondered if I might ask, um, is for you, is that a journey which you're making every time you meditate? Or is that the journey of meditation, contemplation, which you have been making to various degrees at any one time over time?
Yes, it's not a journey. I don't know. I expressed it as a series of steps, really, but of course, it's not really like that. At different times, we're in different places, and it's an overall journey. It's something. I suppose we go forward, or we're taken forward. We don't go anywhere. We're taken by God, and it's at His will, really. And it's not always blessings and peace. Sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes even despair. But it's all at God's will, and we have to just submit to that. And it changes each time. And you never know. I never know what it's going to be like in contemplative prayer because it's not me that's doing it. It's entirely down to God. That's all I can say, really.
Thank you.
Maybe I can say something in a couple of ways about all of that. Though I'm remembering something that Thomas Merton wrote about the dark night of the soul, and meeting that place where all our concepts, all our practices and so on just fall into void, something like void. And he speaks about how this is the time when we must let go of, I guess you could say, ego and egoic need for certainty and everything else. But he says that this is something which I think could be thought about. Because when it's said plainly as it appears on the page, it doesn't quite mean, I don't think, what that doesn't mean what he means. But he says that it's necessary to have a deep-rooted faith at this point. And Malcolm, you talk about the faith, to how we move forward in faith. But he says that this faith must be rooted theologically, which is certainly on the surface, theologically, is purely of the mind. And it would be easy to think, okay, well, he's a Roman Catholic monk, and what he's saying is you must have that strong doctrine, that sense of doctrine that you can find in the books on what is right belief and so on within the Catholic tradition. But these are the very things that early on, when we meet darkness or void, that either fall away or we try to scrabble back and hold on to them. And if we do that, then we just bring ourselves into great suffering, because we have already come through our meditation, our contemplative prayer. If we reach this darkness, this void, then we've already come too far to hold on to the kind of not infantile, but simplistic thoughts that pass for religious orthodoxy. So if we scramble back, then we are in a place where really, if we are honest with ourselves and remain authentic in any way to what we feel or experience, then we lose faith. And if we lose faith, then it's going to be very hard to get through that dark night. So that's one angle on it. Another is that I think, Malcolm, you quite helpfully said it will end. If we carry on in faith and we just feel the nothingness and the negation of ourselves and the negation of our religion and the absence of the presence of God. But if we carry on in faith, then it'll be different, but it'll come back to us. And it'll end. But at the same time, I experience the end of it, but then the coming back of darkness again, and so on. And I know that Teresa of Calcutta, is it? Saint Teresa, anyway, of the last century, the 20th century. She wrote in her memoirs that her Dark Night of the Soul was going on from about 1948, and it was still going on when she was coming to her death. I think was that 1998 or something? I'm not sure. 50 years, and yet she she carried on in faith, didn't she? She put herself in places that not many people put themselves in, and gave of her faith. So I haven't rounded any of that off, but just looking at it from those couple of aspects.
Thank you, Tim. I feel a sort of a mix of emotions, and one of them is awe, if that is an emotion, at what we're engaged in, as expressed by both in our contemplative life. And for me, this this process, I can see most clearly on retreat, on individual retreat, where the process is strung out, and I'm making the journey again through those parts of that extreme of going into leaving home, walking into the retreat space, closing the door, and the retreats which have been most transformative for me have been literally in the dark. And literally not eating and so on. Not that retreats have to be like that at all, but those are the ones which I'm thinking of now. And of that that fear, immediate fear, and I think my meditations, contemplations are a miniature of this all the time. That sort of feeling that fear and tremendous sense of loss, sadness that suddenly, I think in Sufism, we talk about the intoxication of the world, this sort of withdrawal process of being intoxicated by the world. I find that it does require something of me in terms of struggle. Perhaps I'm too attached to the idea of struggle in the early stages of meditation or of retreat, or maybe I'm too attached to the idea that one has to struggle in life. I'm not sure, but I find that turning within, there is always that moment as I cross the threshold, whether on retreat in the way that I'm saying or just sitting, that there's that sense of withdrawal from the intoxication. Just now in this conversation, as hearing the kind of very high and vulnerable voice of my mother downstairs. That's part of the world's intoxication of how that pulls to the outside. And and then so um, at the same time, what I'm experiencing, I think, is that this great enormity within this great enormous expanse within, um, and a kind of the joy of entering that. But the kind of intrusion of different levels of mind on a retreat, certainly, there's kind of uh, kind of like more surface level um, scripts, and then giving way at a later stage to arisings from the mind, which are to do with healing. I think that very, very buried stuff arises to heal, and sometimes in very positive things, memories recaptured of very positive things, which are like resources, treasure, buried treasure, positively. Um, um, and I think what I experience in meditation most often is an in and out consciousness of into activity in the mind, and then realizing that, and then letting that drop away until there's a stillness, and then um, um, and um, and then I feel that sense of being lifted, and no effort, and that being given to me. So I suppose I'm one of the things I'm intrigued about is from you, perhaps, Malcolm, is it's you quite often say, which I admire, it's all grace. It's not up to us. I find that beginning bit is, as I say, perhaps I'm attached to struggle, but I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that.
For me now, it's a question of just putting myself at God's disposal, as it were, in a situation where that can happen. I mean, I would echo your comments about retreats, because retreats have been important for me also. I mean, ideally, the retreat is inside our head and would be always there.
Mm.
But until we reach, if ever, that sort of stage, then retreats are an important practical way of putting ourselves at God's disposal.
Mm.
So there is that willful thing on, although even that is something that we're led to, I think.
Yes, in that sense, yes, I agree.
But retreats for me, I mean, not the ones that you obviously sometimes go to that are in darkness and not eating and all of that, that's something that most people wouldn't do. But for me, retreats at least have to be silent retreats,
Mm.
because otherwise it's just a kind of social holiday, um, as I see it. So a silent retreat is for me, and I'm going on one in a couple of months again, an important way of putting myself at God's disposal. Um, yeah, I'm not sure whether that answers what you were saying, but it's just a comment.
Yes, I think in the sense of like we wouldn't be going on a retreat in a sense if we had not put ourselves at God's
Mm,
disposal, that we're not led by God. Yes, yes, that within that um overall, uh, yeah,
because from a worldly point of view, it doesn't make any sense at all, does it?
none, none of it does.
So it must be led by God.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. If that, in that sense, I totally agree.
So maybe it's worth us talking about what is going on when we meet that void. Joy, you've talked clearly about experience within the retreat situation, and we seek out retreat, um, and and presumably know that there's going to be struggle and pain and light and hope and everything else. Otherwise, it would be pointless going on retreat again if none of that happened. But what is happening to us in the void? And of course, we could draw on um, libraries of literature about it. But for us, what is happening? Is it is it divine therapy, as Thomas Keating might call it? What's falling away? Why are we scared? Why are we scared? Do you both experience, or have you experienced real fear in your meditation life or in life, in your relationship with the divine and the human?
Hmm.
You were talking recently, Joe, about finding yourself sitting somewhere with nothingness and not caring about God anymore, if God even existed. Can you
Mm.
say something about that?
Hmm. Um, I think generally to answer your point, in, I kind of tend to, I think, live my life like feel the fear and do it anyway, wherever that quote comes from. I feel that life is quite disturbing, quite challenging, well, very actually at times. But I do have faith. Um, the experience that I'd mentioned to you that you're referring to is it was a dark night and it was on retreat, and um, I was very afraid. On previous retreats, I had not wanted to go any further into the void. What we might call a void, and because I was afraid of losing myself totally, like I'd never come back. and and I I I not can't quite remember now, but the whole thing. But what I found, it just got literally. I was in the dark anyway, but it literally got darker and darker. It's like everything inside me just shut down, and I found myself in this dark landscape, like sitting, as it were, on the surface of a planet. I mean, it's pretty, from a psychiatrist's point of view, pretty schizoid experience. And if one had that experience at some other time in life, one might be concerned. But in a retreat setting with a retreat guide, it's a transformative experience. And so I found myself sitting on this, like, as if I was like sitting, holding my knees, kind of thing, so sitting on the surface of this planet in the dark, looking down far, far away at planet Earth and where, you know, and uh, and it had been preceded actually by an experience of shaking, so that that actually I couldn't stop myself shaking all over, and it's like everything was coming loose, and except for my right hand, my egoic hand, as it were, just completely not shaking. The rest of me was shaking all over, and I was. I remember my guide was there. I went to get him, and I remember I was just swearing and saying, "Well, I might as well go out and murder people because obviously, you know, God didn't exist." And so that then led to this experience actually during the retreat for 3 days in this kind of dark alienation, really, from any kind of reality which I knew, and completely losing faith in God. And I mean, God didn't any longer exist, and I didn't care. I didn't care at all. So it was that loss of care, actually, loss of, I suppose, attachment to what I thought was me, what I thought was what I was doing there, what I thought was God, that I actually totally didn't care any longer. And then after 3 days of that, it was literally like a resurrection of coming out of that. And I don't remember it as being like into some sort of sublimity or sublime state. It's simply recovering myself, but with a certainty which was shattered. That for the first time in my life, I think I truly realized that that I didn't know, and that my mind was not to be, that all the stuff in my mind was not. It was just mind. It was just concepts, images, opinions, scripts, whatever, which were not me. So, and that then built on retreats after that, then, which is recovering faith, really. Yeah. So that's what I mentioned to Tim. And I can't actually remember how you began when you asked me that.
I was just asking you to share the experience, really, because what is going on? Why are we in the void? And what is happening to us? Again, I'm thinking about this on a practical level for as well as our experience, because there are some very there's the kind of psychology and spirituality are dancing here in a way, which can be very helpful, but also could be very dangerous, I think, for people who are experiencing alone this sense of void that comes, as Malcolm mentioned earlier on, to all of us if we proceed in meditation and contemplative prayer on this journey. If we've embarked on this journey and we've consented to do that, we are going to, it seems to me, going to meet these kinds of experiences, and however they manifest themselves. So what do you feel was going on there? What do you feel? What was happening to you?
I think that it was a dark night of the mind. I think what John of the Cross would call dark night of the senses. It was an eclipse of my mind. I think it's literally, as in an eclipse. Yes.
But you emerged from it with the sense, the knowledge that what goes on in your mind, the thoughts, the concepts, the emotions, they're not the real you.
Yeah.
And presumably that's, or something of that has remained with you.
Yeah.
And that's a huge breakthrough, I think, spiritually, to recognize that all of the things that you previously thought valued so much that were the real you are not actually.
Yeah.
And it's possible even to get kind of attached to the void as well as a concept, and as something we're doing pretty well if we've reached there. It's possible to get attached to that sort of notion, which is quite damaging, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if we make it into a concept, then it's just another piece of our mind.
Exactly that. Yeah, and it's continuous anyway, isn't it? Because one's building mind castles all the time, and that's what, as you so eloquently described, what we're doing all the time. We're unpicking it every meditation session. We sit down and we unpick, don't we? We let go. In order, you described letting go of the outside world, letting go of the body. It's that process, isn't it, of consciously unpicking, detaching, literally like uh, letting go, the kind of removing the sort of grappling hooks out of to what we're attached.
The bondage, yeah.
The bondage, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? What do we do it for? It's bondage.
Going back to an earlier part of Malcolm's introduction, there has to be, or there is a point where we realize that what's going on here is grace, and that our unpicking is active. And if we're unpicking something, then that's egoic. It's only our ego that unpicks. In grace, God is doing something. And we even going into this situation, and perhaps it's why it's possible to become attached to the void itself. But God has led us there. There's a lot of writing, of course, about how God is being a parent, and it's again it's a concept. God the parent is leading the child into the darkness, into the emptiness, into the nothingness, so that the sense of nothingness is, and the fear that goes with it, is encountered, because God doesn't want us to just be just dependent. God wants us to raise us as children, and it's a metaphor, and it's a concept, but God is raising us to be whole, and therefore independent in that way, unattached, free, however words conceptualize it, but it's by grace. So every time we think we're doing something, even if we're looking at the programs that are being raised in us and our core beliefs, or whatever it is that's been driving us, and we're realizing now, oh yeah, I'm not that person. I've been, someone else has given me that belief that somehow moved me from this place to that place, and I've behaved in this kind of way, and so on. I've lived my life in this way, and then we enter into, well, it's all rubbish. It's all nothing, and I'm nothing, but letting into God's grace, letting be everything into God's grace, we cease to do something then, I think, and maybe this is why it keeps coming back, because it might have that moment and pureness that we're on a journey to, perhaps, I don't know, but this is concept. As soon as we talk, we are in the realm of concept, so it's impossible to be clear, but anyway, it's something in your not caring about God, Joe, whether God existed, and the thoughts, I might as well go and kill everybody because there's nothing, and that kind of something in the God's grace meant something brought you through.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm still concerned for people who find themselves in nothingness and their faith has fallen away, and it's seen that all those structures of belief were maybe as scaffolding to to a cliff where we can jump off or whatever, but they don't know what to do now. So what? What can we say as people within this school of Christian mysticism that might be helpful? And Malcolm, you're a professor of psychiatry or psychology?
Psychiatry.
Psychiatry. What, from that perspective, what can you offer there? Because mental illness gets mixed up with all of this, doesn't it? And by continuing to meditate, it might not be the best thing for everybody in this situation.
Yeah, you pose a difficult question of the interface between psychiatry and religion. The interface is spirituality, I suppose, because psychiatry has a lot in it about the spiritual. You're absolutely right that if people are going through a very difficult time from a mental health point of view, particularly a severe depression or a psychosis, even where people may be having experiences, seeing things, hearing things that are damaging to them. I mean, probably need to get some help with that before entering into meditation or contemplation. It's a difficult one because, I mean, contemplative prayer can be helpful, of course, with anxiety and depression, but when it gets very severe, then perhaps something needs to be done to alleviate that first from a worldly sort of perspective. I suppose it's the same as having a physical illness. It's difficult to enter into contemplative prayer if you're, you know, throwing a great fever because you've got an infection. You'd want the infection treated first, really, before you'd be able to usefully enter into contemplative prayer. And that's one reason why the mystics always advise people not to abuse your body too much, really, not to go to such extremes in fasting and so on that you're weak and feeble. That's not actually helpful. And indeed to look after your body, because that in this life is the vehicle by which you can make some progress. So keeping as healthy as you can is actually a useful and positive thing. Again, I'm not sure if that answers what you were asking, Tim. It's about whether experiences are helpful or not. Obviously, spiritually, people can have experiences that on the face of it might be called psychotic. But if they're helpful, if they lead to spiritual progress and development, then that's a good thing. If they're damaging to yourself or to anybody else, then that's not a good thing. And it's very simple, really. I think even the word psychosis is a very confusing thing, which can in itself be a damaging thing. You know, to medicalize everything is not helpful. Yeah.
I guess we could say as well that there are no shortcuts to walking with God, walking with our human divine nature. And so any techniques such as extreme fasting or meditating for 6 weeks or something without drinking water, and that's probably not possible. But whatever it is, it's not this. It might be a sensual thing, but grace comes in God's time, and the more we're pushing, then we're in the way of God's grace, and perhaps mental illness is. I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? It's a really difficult area.
Calling it illness is a difficult thing
Yeah.
in
Yes.
itself.
Yeah.
It's medicalizing people's experience.
Yeah.
Yes, and sometimes great sensitivity to the divine. Sometimes I was just being brought back to these, and I guess we must probably come to a finish soon. I'm not sure about the timing today. I was just being drawn back really to that before we engage on the journey of meditation in any one instant, that we are grounding ourselves, aren't we? We're in a place where we have a technique, even if that technique isn't very complicated. Nevertheless, we have a way of having a home to come back to, and although I think that what Malcolm, you're saying about the health of the body, we want a healthy ego too, don't we? Although we're laying the ego aside so that we can find that identity which is out deeper than ego. Nevertheless, we want a healthy ego. We want a healthy body, and other things which help us. I'm thinking so that these experiences that we're talking about are held within some safe environment, are spiritual guidance. If one's part of a church or praying or meditating community, these are things which, in my case, when I had that experience, it was a very held experience, and not very likely to happen outside of a held experience, really. So just reminding us really about, what we need before we even begin to take off, as it were.
I think that is so important, to either have a spiritual advisor of some kind, or to be part of a community where that kind of support is there. Just to go off on your own and think that you can just go solo is well, it's not going to work. I mean, even monastics, before they become hermits, are expected to spend quite a long time in the monastery, getting their grounding, their spiritual grounding, their faith grounding, before they're considered ready to go off and be hermits. You can't just go off. I mean, some great people have done that, but for the general population, you need to be part of a community of like-minded people. Not always easy to find these days, not necessarily found in some churches, but need to be part of a like-minded community like this
Mm-hmm.
one, really, where
Mm-hmm.
these kind of things can be discussed without it being thought that you're going off the rails in some kind of way.
Yeah.
And it's not possible to speak about these things in many situations, even in many religious or church situations. You would be reluctant to talk about this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Shall we just end with prayer?
Yeah.
We pray to you, God. We thank you for the grace of our pilgrimage through this life. That you give us this life. That you teach us through our meditation, our prayer, and contemplative practice. We simply pray for all who are on this path, this journey. Journey really of repentance away from everything we think towards your presence. Where concepts fall away and words with them, and all there is all and all in you.